we're kicking off season 3 with a top 5.
That's confusing. But
Let's get into that. Before we jump into today's episode, we just wanted to share a few things with you. First, we'd like you to like this episode and then subscribe to our podcast. If you're doing that on YouTube, also hit the bell notification so that you know when we post anything new. And then share this with somebody that you feel like this would be beneficial for.
That's right. If you would like to support our show further, we would welcome that. You are welcome to do that at anchor.fm/marriagebydesign to check out your options for supporting the program financially. Otherwise, guys, the links to our social media are always in the description of every video, so feel free to check those out there. And now, let's get to the show.
Hey, I'm Andrew Warnock.
I'm Nathan Warnock.
And you joined us for Family Friday on the Marriage by Design podcast. This is a time where we get to talk about God's design for family, where we see that in the Bible, and how we live that out, except on Top 5 weeks, where we just get to have fun and talk about Top 5.
Top 5. And
that opening took like 5 takes. We got through it. I'm so glad.
It did. Yeah. We're through it now.
What were you going to say? You know what?
The top 5s can only be told with jazz hands.
The jazz hands. Top 5.
Andrea nailed it with the jazz hands.
Can you do it with me?
Fun story about Nathan and Andrea backstory. If you want some Nathan and Andrea lore, we both were trained in jazz hands for very different reasons. Andrea was a dancer for years and years and years and years. Okay.
You wouldn't
You
know
need
it
to
now.
flip over to YouTube if you're not
You
already
would not
watching,
know
just
it now.
so you can see that. And I was trained in jazz hands because state show choir. That's right, folks. Show choir, state of Nebraska, boss.
I don't think
I don't know
I
what
ever
else
knew
to
that.
say.
I didn't know I didn't know there was like a state show choir.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I
We'll
ever
see.
knew that,
You just looked
Nathan.
down on people that were in choir. That's fine. If you were in choir, you heard it here first. Andrea looked down on you.
I
in high
didn't
school.
say that.
It's
I
fine.
just said
It's
I
no big
didn't
deal.
know that.
It's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Very interesting. Did you how far did you get in state show choir?
All state or whatever. I don't even know what it was called. That's horrible, actually. So here's the real issue with show choir. A lot of the stuff I wanted to do, because I'm not an artsy guy by any stretch, except for acting, storytelling, those types of things I enjoy immensely. And show choir had a bit of an element of that in it, and I enjoyed that. And plus, it was my ticket to be able to go to Disney World. So.
Oh, yes.
Did that in my freshman, sophomore year. Unfortunately, after that, I did not do it anymore because it conflicted with baseball. So, there you have it, guys.
All right.
4 minutes of
Weird
Nathan
talk.
and Andrea backstory. So, if you had
Good
Nathan
stuff.
Warnock show choir on your bingo card,
Check it
go
out.
ahead and mark that bad boy off. All right, so what are we doing for a top 5 today, babe?
Okay, so our top 5 is top 5 aha parenting moments that we've had over the last 12 years.
Love it.
And it can be aha, like things I've learned about parenting, specifically parenting, or things that I've just learned through parenting.
It's great.
All right.
Good. Very good.
All right, so we're going to start. We're going to start with you first.
Let's do it. All right, my number 5 requires a short story. So, when Ryan was very young, she was probably a year and a half, maybe. I mean, she was walking. She discovered that a really fun activity is to climb up on the coffee table, and then I would count to 3, and then she would jump, and I would catch her, and she'd laugh, and it was great. And we'd do this over and over and over and over and over and over.
Little
and over
Ryan
again.
days.
And it was great. So the story is we were doing that, and then I had carried her into the kitchen because Andrea needed to talk about something. And I set her down because Andrea and I are having this conversation. And in the midst of this conversation, you hear Ryan in the other room initiating the countdown.
Yeah.
I wasn't there. No one was, just her in the room. And all of a sudden I just heard 1, 2, and then I raced out in the other room, and sure enough, she was ready to she was going for it. And someone was going to catch her. And the thing I realized thinking back on that moment is I think that moment illustrates why Jesus had such a affinity for children. When he talks about getting into heaven, you need childlike faith. The disciples tried to send the children away, and he said, no, you need to come to me as one of these. And in that moment, that verse made sense to me because Ryan didn't see me standing there, but she knew that I would catch her if she jumped. And for so many of us, one of the most difficult parts of faith is stepping out in faith, right? Trusting God with our finances, trusting God to help us raise our kids, trusting God in our marriage. And man, we need to be more like Ryan in that we come to these large decisions and we just go, well, Lord, I'm jumping. And I'm going to trust that you're going to be there to catch me. So my number 5 is the importance to God of blind faith, as illustrated by my 1.5-year-old daughter.
That's great. Okay, so my number 5 is a spiritual one too. But I understand God's ways better because I'm a parent. So there are times where, my child maybe wants something and I see the whole picture, or they want to do something or whatever, right? I see the whole picture and I tell them no. And to them, it's like, no, but I want this thing, or I want to do that thing, or whatever. And because I see the whole picture, I know that that's actually not good for them. Or because we're actually going to be doing something better. And so we can't do that thing that you want to do. I just can't tell you about it right now, or whatever it is, right?
Sure.
Or just because practically this, whatever. You can't have this thing, or we can't do this thing. But I see the whole picture and they don't. And so I sometimes have to tell them no because it's for their good. And
Sure.
And so I understand God's ways so much better because of parenting. There's so many things about the Lord that I understand so much better because I'm a parent, and you can understand that relationship a lot better and understand, God's love, just like we love our children, God's love for us.
Right.
And really, I do want to give my kids everything. And I would love to just give them everything their heart desires and to spoil them like crazy.
Sure.
And to never have to tell them no and to never have to discipline them. I would love that, but that's not for their good.
Right.
I have to discipline them because they need to learn these lessons.
Yeah.
I have to tell them no sometimes because I can't have greedy children who aren't thankful for anything, which is maybe what would happen if I never said no to all of their desires. Or I have to say no again sometimes because there's something better out there or whatever. So it's amazing how much more I feel like I've learned about the Lord and his relationship with us because of parenting.
Yeah, that's good. Real good. My number 4 is a realization of a way that we as parents, particularly modern parents, my generation, younger parents, are screwing up a fundamental truth about kids. The reality of children, and this was the aha thing for me, is that children are physically resilient, but emotionally vulnerable. But when you look around at the majority of parenting today, we have parents who treat their children as if they are physically vulnerable and emotionally resilient. And here's what I mean by that. The entire idea of helicopter parenting is this idea that I need to be right there with my kid because they're going to get hurt. They're going to do something that they're going to break their arm. They're going to fall off this thing. They're going to try and do something they physically can't do. And if it doesn't work out, I need to be there to catch them. False. Our kids are physically way more resilient than you think. And I understand there are some youth that have disabilities or things that make them more physically vulnerable. But in general, I've realized from our children, kids are way more physically resilient than we think. So let them go, right? Let them experience their independence. Let your younger kids jump off that 10-foot wall right? And, you can be there to kind of help them land it, or to give them some guidance ahead of time to go, hey, land soft on your feet, these kind of teaching things. But let your kids climb that tree. Let them, walk home from school at maybe a younger age than you're comfortable with, but maybe with you kind of following behind at a distance. Let them do these things, because are they going to get hurt? Yeah, they're probably going to get hurt at times. But the broken bone that would take you or I 6 months to heal takes them 5 weeks and they're back doing the stuff. The cut that, we're so concerned is going to get infected and we're going to have to cut their leg off, they're going to shake it right off, right? Our kids they're just more physically resilient, but they're more emotionally vulnerable than we think. And yet, what do? We clamp down all the clamps on trying to protect them physically, and then we hand them access to the internet like that's not going to have any negative consequences on our kids. They are more emotionally vulnerable than you think they are. So let's stop. The thing I've had, the aha moment for me is stop worrying about their physical resilience and start being consumed with protecting and pouring into their emotional vulnerability. Build them up as a father. Make sure they know they're loved. Make sure my boys know I'm proud of them. Make sure my daughter knows I think she's beautiful and the Lord thinks she's beautiful. Really pour into the emotional side of our kids, and then let them run around outside in the neighborhood until the street lights come on. And be okay with that, right? Let them do the physical things that they want to do, understanding that there is some physical risk, but they're more resilient in that way than you think. Less emotionally resilient, more emotionally vulnerable than you think. So ease off on the physical, really pour into the emotional.
That's great. Okay, my number 4 is the answer is not always the answer. So what I mean by that is you may have your first child and think, I've got all the answers, or I've got a lot of the answers. I have done this parenting thing. I can do it again, whatever. And then you have a second child and you're like,
what just happened?
Wait, those answers don't work now. What's wrong? Our children are so different. Even though they're raised in the same home with the same parents, they're different people and they need different things.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so realizing that I have never arrived in my parenting, first of all, and just as soon as I think I've figured it out with some issue, the next child comes along and they need parenting in a completely different way. So my aha moment through the years has been like, I can't parent my kids the same. There are some things that we're able to do the same, of course, but thinking about all my children, they're very different, and the discipline or the love that I give to one child doesn't make a bit of difference with another child.
Yeah.
And they can be just on the complete opposite ends of the earth with both of those things sometimes. So the answer that you may have thought you have arrived with, congratulations, you may have arrived with one child on that, but you may have many others that will just not work, and it's not the answer.
Yeah, and the really frustrating thing is, like us as spouses, you'll figure it out right about the time your kid hits an intellectual or emotional sort of growing point, and it'll completely change.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right. That's the fun of parenting. It's always
really
changing.
Good. That's a good one, babe. Okay. My number 3 is what I have learned about the nature of human beings from children. So there's a long-standing debate amongst human beings going back to classical era and predating that. I mean, you can see this disagreement even in the Bible about whether human beings are inherently good or inherently evil, bad, whatever word you want to use for it. Right? When we're born, are we good, inherently good, and then we're nurtured into being bad? Or are we just inherently bad? And of course, from a Christian standpoint, we understand that the Bible teaches that we're inherently bad, right? We're born with original sin. It's passed down to us through a process that I don't really fully understand.
We're born with a sin nature.
We're born with a sin nature, which means apart from Jesus Christ, who overcame all of those temptations, we're born, well, not good.
Well, just think about a 2-year-old. Do you have to teach a 2-year-old to be good?
That's the
or
point.
You have to teach a 2-year-old to be naughty?
That's exactly the point. We currently have a 6-month-old, and he's sweet and precious and always smiles and just wants to snuggle you up and hang out and love you and kiss you and do all the things. But one of these days, in the very near future, he's going to realize that he has his own independent being. And we're going to teach him to do this, but at some point you're going to go, Easton, do not spit your oatmeal out. And he's going to look at you. And that's the moment when you know, because at 10 months, he's not been nurtured into having a sin nature, right? He just has it. And at some point, he reaches an age where he realizes, I have to choose. Mm-hmm. Do I do the thing that the authority that's in my life is asking me to do, or do I do my own thing? And look, a 9-month-old isn't going through that process, but that's the process. They just don't know that's the process. And they're going to want to exercise that independence. And so, as Andrea asked, apt question, do we, what is the discipleship for us of our kids? Do we need to disciple them? Hey, these are bad things. You shouldn't do these. Well, in some cases, yes. But in most cases, they'll figure those things out. We need to be training them in, here's the good that we should be pursuing, right? Whether it's obedience to authority, respect, love, whatever the thing is. But that's what we need to be training them in. They'll figure out the no-nos on their own because it's within their nature to do it.
Yep. Okay, my number 3 is that less is more when lecturing. I have a hard time with this. I do. Nathan, if you're not watching, Nathan's like,
between you and I, she does have a hard time with that sometimes. Just between us. Don't tell her I said anything.
It's so hard to not keep going and going. Like, I don't know why, to like really make my point. I'm not sure. We have good friends of ours who their adult children make fun of the mom and the way that she lectured them when they were growing up. Like,
the train.
Not make fun of, but like in a harsh way, but they're kind of all laughing about it, right? Including the mom. But they'll be talking about this issue or whatever, and they'll make train noises or something like that. This is how I remember it. Maybe it's not exact, but
that's right.
Because the train just kept going around and around and around and around, and
once
she couldn't,
the train left the station, it wasn't stopping.
Right. And that was probably, I mean, we heard that story from them when Jackson was really, really young. Yeah. And I still haven't fully learned my lesson on that, but it gets better year by year. But for sure with lecturing your child or with talking to them about an issue, less is more when it's not a conversation and when it's really more of a lecture. Like keeping it to the point and moving on, you're gonna make your point better when you do that.
Yeah, I would not say you're like the train. You're like the Grand Inquisitor. Like, once you're on the trail of something that you want to get to the bottom of, it is not stopping until you've gotten to the bottom of that thing.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that can be a positive thing, right?
Nathan hates it.
There are kids that need to be shaken up sometimes, but you're right. It can be destructive too.
Right.
So that's not good.
Lecturing or being the Grand Inquisitor or whatever, less is more. Just keep praying that their sins will find them out.
Right.
And my parents did that with me. And it worked really well. So pray that their sins will find them out, and that you don't have to then you don't have to worry about ferreting everything out.
It's good, babe. Real good. My number 2 aha moment is the amount of times with parents that short-term thinking negatively impacts your long-term decisions. And here's one of the main reasons that I think of this. We have run into correct me if I'm wrong, babe, but I don't think we have ever run into a couple who is 50-year-old plus who has gone, you know what? We're really glad we didn't have any more kids. Like, I can't think of... I know they're out. I know they're out there, right? But
there's
the
people that we've
majority...
talked to that are like, you know, we had the right amount of kids or whatever.
Right. The majority of the people that we've talked to have said, you know, those young years are so hard, but now that our kids are grown, we wish we had more of them. And they are hard. I mean, we're in the thick of that right now, and certainly Andrea does an incredible job of holding our family together and raising the kids. And you know, I go to work for each day, and she stays here and raises them up in the way they should go and does an amazing job of it. But it's hard, and there are so many young couples that go, I can't, you know, we have one child who's 13 months old, and now we can't go out with our friends whenever we want, and you know, we're the only couple with a child, and our other friends don't have children, and you know, so we just want to, like, we have our child, and now we're done. And they're making that eternal decision, a lifetime decision, based on a short-term pain point. And that's not a way to live our lives. And, you know, I just want, if there's someone out there who's just listening to this on a whim but has been stressing with this, I want to encourage you to not let Satan steal future joy with current grind of life. This life on earth is a grind. It's a grind because of sin. But God is bigger, and if God has a plan for more kids in your life, don't try and stop that or change his mind because your 2-year-old is a pistol. And you know, man, I look around and I see the dropping birth rate even amongst Christian families, Christian couples, and I read some of the horror stories of, you know, what's going on really in population wise in this world. I just heard a statistic that 60% of babies worldwide, and it's not exactly 60 something percent of babies worldwide are aborted. That's incredible to think about. And I know not everyone looks at this from a biblical standpoint, but just from a sheer joy standpoint, your kids are a joy to you. The Bible says, with regards to a mother, your children will rise up and call you blessed. But they're not going to do that when they're 3 and stupid, right? Or 13 and stupid. And I've said this before on this channel, and I know it rubs some people the wrong way. Children are stupid. Like, by definition, they're stupid. That's why we don't come home from work, sit at our 11-year-old's feet and go, man, could you just tell me about life and the way things are? We have to teach them that, because from a definitional standpoint, they're not intelligent. They're children. That's our job to bring that to them. But once they reach the age of maturity, they will rise up and call you blessed. And when they do, I'd rather have lots of people rising up and calling you blessed than few people rising up and calling her blessed. And all the lessons that we get to learn from our kids. I mean, it's what we're talking about tonight. So don't let short-term grind and short-term pain steal your long-term blessing.
Yeah, here's an honorable mention, parenting moment, or something that I've learned from parenting. I appreciate my parents so much more, and the parenting that they gave me, and the sacrifices that they made to parent me in becoming a parent. Like
100%.
I will. There's been many times over the last 12 years that I've called my parents and been like, oh man, I'm so sorry. Or, oh gosh, thank you so much. Because I get it now. Like, there are things along the way that I get that so much better because I'm a parent.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, so my number 2, what are we on? 2.
Number 2
is endurance. It's kind of a little bit of what you were talking about. Endurance turns into complexity. So in those young years, parenting is all about endurance, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You're enduring the day a lot of times with those young years. It's a lot of being so tired and pouring all of yourself out,
Right.
physically, emotionally, every which way for those young years, right? But then as they get older, it's less of that endurance, because they become, they become more independent and self-reliant and all that sort of thing. But the complexity of parenting becomes more and more. Their issues
right,
become more complex. Their thinking becomes more complex. So they have, their own thoughts and their own ways and their own choices. And your parenting becomes more complex, or your need to understand how to parent becomes harder. And so, I think that's been a huge aha moment for me. Not that it's really like some big thing that we didn't all know already, but just especially because I have such young ones and a little bit older one,
Sure.
a preteen,
Sure.
You realize when you've got the spread, I think I realize more and more that, this is a race of endurance when they're really young, but it gets so much more complex as they get older and needing
It's true.
to pour yourself out in a different way.
Right.
Okay, what's your number one aha moment in parenting?
Number one aha moment for me in parenting has been how freeing it is for me as a father when I accept that my children are not my children. So, once I realized that you had all of these children with someone else, just kidding. That's definitely not what I'm talking about.
Wow, clickbait.
Right. No, once I accepted that they're God's children and he just delivered his child to your womb with my help, man, that's so freeing. Mm-hmm. Because how often do we freak out about our kids, but if we're really being honest in our heart of hearts, and don't act like I'm the only one if you're watching this video or listening to this podcast, what we're really freaking out about is, what are people going to think about me because of this child? In good and bad ways. I mean, I coach a sports team. There's crazy parents around youth sports. Our parents have been good on our team, but there's a lot of parents on youth sports teams that are crazy. Well, why are they crazy? What difference does it make to you, a grown man or grown woman, if your child does or doesn't play all the innings you think they ought to play, or doesn't play the position you think they ought to play? Well, how is it not that you're thinking it's a reflection on you? Right? We're all afraid our child's going to be the next Hitler, right? If he or she is, then they is, right?
Wow.
And shame on them for that. Mm. But it's freeing for us as parents, unless you're actively steeping your child in Mein Kampf in an effort of trying to get them to become something horrible. They're going to make their choices, right? And it should be freeing to us as parents to recognize these are children that have been given to me for a time. It is my responsibility to steward, disciple, shepherd these children in a way that's honoring to God, because ultimately they're God's kids. So in some ways, this can be more daunting, but here's the reason why it's freeing for me. Because they were created by God, who also is the Holy Spirit, who also lives in me. So at the end of the day, all I need to do is focus on my intimacy with the Lord, understanding more about who God is through reading his Bible, through time in prayer, through conversation with the Holy Spirit. And through that time, I'm going to be equipped by the Holy Spirit with how to best shepherd and disciple God's kids that live in my home. And so for me, it's really freeing, and it was really an aha moment that like a backpack of bricks fell off my back to just recognize, you know what, God, they're your children. You're gonna have to deal with them, and help me understand how I can play a role in that. And look, I don't do it right a lot of the time, and you know, I'll answer to the Lord for that, and I ask the Lord that He forgives me for when I don't do it right. But I also am okay going to Him in prayer and going, Lord, you've got to help me here, because I don't know how to reach this child, and it's your child ultimately, so you know. So help Andrea understand how can we reach your children that you've given us to live in our home.
Yeah.
That's my number one.
That's good. So when you've been married for this many years, you end up thinking alike, and your number ones end up being the same thing.
Stop it. Really?
Yeah. So
that's great.
So yeah, my number one is that my responsibility is to love my children, equip my children to be people who love and serve the Lord, who are upstanding citizens, hard workers, all that sort of thing. That's my responsibility as a parent, right?
That's right.
Not my responsibility who they turn out to be.
Right.
Because like Nathan just said it. That's up to them. They are their own person. They get to make their own choices. And
that's right.
My responsibility that like Nathan said, we don't do perfectly, is to do what God's asked me to do. And then the rest is up to my child.
Right.
Or they're
exactly
their
right.
own, they are their own people, and they're going to make their own choices.
That's right.
And Nathan and I can both say we both chose to walk for a while in a way that was not the way that we were raised, but we had that ingrained in us. You know, we had great parents. We have great parents. They parented us really well. We knew what the truth was. We chose to walk away from that for a while, and we came back to it. And they prayed us through that whole thing, you know,
right.
that whole time. And so the parenting part was our parents' responsibility, and then the choices that we make was ours.
That's right.
So I think that's a huge aha moment. It's still really hard to drop that weight, though. I don't particularly care this is me. I don't care what other people think about the way my kids turn out. I care.
Sure.
And so it's not always about like caring about what other people think. I don't. But I care, and I want the best for my kids.
Sure.
You know, that's a big thing for me, is like, I want them to be who God has made them to be, because I know that's the best place. That's the best thing for them. And so, you know, we pray that they choose that. Some of them probably won't for a time, and we'll go from there. But
it's good.
But yeah, like Nathan said, it's a huge weight when you think like that's their deal, not mine.
Right. It's good.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to do top fives. This is a little bit heavier of a top five, but it's good to think about all the lessons that we learn through parenting. And I'm sure, because we've got so much more parenting to go, there's a lot more lessons that we'll learn along the way.
That's right. So what about you? Now that you've listened to this podcast, I want you to tell us, what have been some of your aha moments in your parenting? And maybe you're currently being parented still. Maybe you're listening to this as a younger, individual, and you have been parented more recently by your parents. Or even if you're not, you might look back on the way your parents parented you and realize that you learned some things about parenting or about the Lord in an aha fashion from them. Hop on over to our Facebook page, leave us a message on Facebook, Instagram, tweet at us, however you want to get at us. I want to hear what your aha moments from parenting is. Until then, guys, happy Family Friday. Have a great weekend, and we'll see y'all back on Monday. Remember, God is for your family.